The bitter January wind cut through my thin coat as I hurried down Mulberry Street toward Bellissimo, the upscale Italian restaurant where I worked part-time. My cheeks stung from the cold, and I clutched my phone in my gloved hand, checking the time with a grimace. I was late, again. Ducking under the red awning of Bellissimo, I pushed open the heavy wooden door and was immediately greeted by a rush of warmth and the rich aroma of tomato, basil, and garlic. The cozy interior, terrazzo floors, white tablecloths, and flickering candlelight was a sharp contrast to the biting cold outside. I unwound my scarf as I slipped through the entryway. "Sophia, you're 10 minutes late," came a sharp whisper and accented English from my manager, Marco, as I passed by the bustling kitchen door. He was a wiry man with thinning hair, currently frowning over a seating chart. "Table 7 has been waiting for their drinks." "Move it." "Mi dispiace, I'm sorry," I murmured in apology, instinctively mixing Italian into my English. My nerves were already frayed from sprinting 5 blocks in the cold. I hung my coat in the back and quickly tied on my black apron. Marco thrust a tray into my hands with an impatient huff, and I balanced it carefully, heading out to the dining floor. A quick scan of the room told me everything I needed to know. Bellissimo was packed tonight. Families lingered over pasta at corner tables. Couples twirled spaghetti and shared secret smiles, and the chatter of content diners hummed in the air. But at the center, commanding my attention, was table 7. There were 5 men seated at table 7, and even without Marco's warning, I could tell they were VIPs. They carried themselves with an easy, confident authority. 4 of them wore suits that likely cost more than I'd make in a year. The 5th man, at the head of the table, was especially striking. Late 30s or early 40s. Dark hair swept back from a strong-boned face, and an aura of quiet power that seemed to make the air around him still. Unlike the others, his tie was loosened slightly and the top button of his crisp white shirt undone, as if he never had to prove formality to anyone. I approached carefully, forcing a polite smile despite the nervous flutter in my stomach. As I neared, I caught snippets of their conversation in Italian, low, rapid exchanges I couldn't quite catch over the dining room noise. One of the men, a broad-shouldered fellow with a scar on his cheek, noticed me and fell silent, causing the others to turn my way. "Buonasera," I greeted softly, the greeting slipping out in Italian before I could stop myself. "Good evening." Their eyebrows rose almost in unison. Usually I kept my knowledge of languages to myself at the restaurant, and the unassuming waitress draws less attention, but it had been an automatic reflex. The man at the head of the table, the one with the commanding presence, fixed me with a curious gaze. His eyes were a piercing gray, cool and assessing under dark, thick lashes. Up close, he was even more intimidatingly handsome, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in a tailored suit in an advertisement, rather than sitting in a Little Italy restaurant. But there was something dangerous coiled beneath that polished exterior. I could sense it in the way his gaze sharpened on me. He responded in English, voice low and smooth. "Good evening. You speak Italian?" I realized my slip and cleared my throat. "Ah, just a little," I lied, balancing the tray against my hip. "What can I start you with?" The men exchanged glances. One of the others, a genial-looking older man with silver at his temples, smiled at me and ordered a round of Prosecco to start. I scribbled on my pad, feeling the weight of their attention still on me, especially the gray-eyed leader. As I turned to fetch their drinks, I heard one of them murmur in Italian, "Lei capisce? Does she understand?" I kept my stride smooth, as if I didn't hear. In truth, I understood perfectly. Fluent Italian, French, Spanish, and a smattering of Russian languages were my passion and one of the few things I could thank my unpredictable upbringing for. My mother, an Italian by birth, had moved us between countries frequently during my childhood, following her work as a translator. I had grown up equally at home in backstreet Roman cafes and stuffy London libraries. Languages came as second nature to me. But here in New York, working as a waitress to pay off student loans and to support my ailing mother back in Italy, I usually kept that part of myself under wraps. No sense in drawing attention or inviting questions. By the time I returned with a chilled bottle of Prosecco and 5 elegant flutes, Table 7 had shifted into an intense discussion. They had papers spread out, odd for a dinner, and spoke in hushed, rapid-fire Italian. I caught a word here and there. Shipments, Montreal, percentages, the tone suggesting negotiation or strategy. Definitely not a casual social dinner. I pretended not to notice, focusing on pouring the pale, sparkling wine. As I leaned between the suited men to fill the final glass, I glimpsed a black pistol holster just beneath one man's jacket, the dull metal of a gun catching the light. I nearly faltered, heart lurching, but steadied myself. I replaced the bottle on my tray, careful not to reveal my unease. Suddenly the pieces clicked. The guarded way they sat, backs to the wall. The way the restaurant's owner, normally gregarious, had personally escorted them to the best table with a deep respect. These men were not ordinary businessmen. They were something far more dangerous. I stepped back, and in that moment, my phone vibrated in my apron pocket. Once then again, persistent, startled, I discreetly slid it out to glance at the screen. My stomach clenched at the caller ID. It was an international number, Italy. More specifically, the number for my mother's hospice in Rome. A spike of fear went through me. Mama. I'd been expecting an update from her nurse all week with a mix of hope and dread, but she rarely called during my work hours unless it was urgent. I bit my lip. Technically, phones on the floor were forbidden. But if I stepped into the back hallway for just a moment, the phone buzzed insistently again. Casting a quick look around, the men at table 7 were engrossed in their conversation again, and Marco was busy at the bar. I took 2 steps back toward the shadowy corridor by the bathrooms and answered quietly, switching to Italian. Pronto? I whispered. Hello? Signorina Lombardi? A trembling female voice answered. It was Marta, my mother's nurse. My heart dropped into my stomach. Something was wrong. Marta never sounded so shaken. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear and ducked further around the corner, one eye still on table 7 through the gap. The men continued talking, oblivious for now. Marta, sì, sono io, I replied in a rush, identifying myself. Cosa è successo? What's happened? È tua madre. Marta's breath hitched, and she launched into a frantic explanation. I strained to catch the words, blood roaring in my ears. Degli uomini sono venuti. L'hanno presa. Some men came. They've taken her. I clutched the phone as if it were a lifeline. Che cosa? Chi l'ha presa? What? Who took her? I struggled to keep my voice low. Non lo so. Erano armati. Hanno detto che un messaggio per il suo capo. I don't know. They were armed. They said a message for her boss. Her boss? None of this made any sense. My mother was a retired translator, now a hospice patient. She had no boss. Unless, my thoughts raced, unless they thought of someone else? Or was this some kind of mistake? Hanno detto che la porteranno via. Al-Sad. They said they'll take her away. To the south. Marta's voice broke on a sob. Hanno minacciato di uccidermi se chiamavo la polizia. Mi dispiace, mi dispiace. They threatened to kill me if I called the police. I'm sorry. Marta, calma, I said quickly, though my own hands were shaking. Hai fatto bene a chiamarmi. Cercherò di... My breath caught. Marta, calm down. You did well to call me. I'll try to... What? What could I do from here? My mother was kidnapped, taken by armed men, presumably criminals, and being whisked off to the south, likely southern Italy. A cold wave of helplessness crashed over me. I had to get to Italy. I had to do something. My mother's face swam in my mind. Gentle eyes. A frail smile from the hospital bed when I last visited her. Tears burned at the edges of my eyes, but I blinked them back fiercely. Not here, not now. Marta, listen. I forced steel into my tone. Don't call the police yet. Stay safe and try to find out anything you can. I'll be there as soon as possible. Per favore, prenditi cura. Take care until I arrive. Marta agreed in a whisper, and the call ended. I slowly lowered the phone, my entire body trembling with adrenaline and shock. My mother, my only family, had been kidnapped, and I had no idea by whom or why. I exhaled shakily. I needed help. Someone who understood this underworld of threats and violence. Someone who could get me to Italy fast. My savings were thin, and booking a last-minute flight would drain what little I had. Even then, I had no plan for what to do once I got there. I was a linguist, not a detective or a fighter. I wiped a hand over my eyes. Focus, Sophia. One step at a time. First, get out of here. Marco would have to forgive me. Family emergency was an understatement. I turned to head back toward the kitchen, ready to beg Marco for the rest of the night off, when I collided with a solid wall of muscle. No, not a wall, a man. One of the men from table 7. The scar-cheeked, broad-shouldered one had silently followed me. I nearly yelped, stepping back. His dark eyes flicked from me to the phone in my hand. I wasn't sure how much he'd heard, but his expression was stone hard. I'm sorry, I stammered in English, trying to slip past him. Excuse me, he didn't budge. In fact, he shifted slightly to block my path more fully. My pulse kicked up in fear. Over his shoulder, I could see the rest of table 7 now watching us. The entire restaurant felt like it receded, my field of vision narrowing on the dangerous figures now fixated on me. The scarred man said nothing. Instead, he inclined his head as if listening to an instruction only he could hear. An earpiece. I realized belatedly, mostly hidden in his ear. My mouth went dry. What had I gotten myself into? Is everything all right, miss? The smooth, controlled voice of the gray-eyed man spoke from the table. He addressed me calmly, but there was an undertone that prickled my skin, as if he already knew something was amiss. Under the weight of his stare, I struggled to find my voice. Yes, sir, I'm sorry for the interruption. My voice sounded brittle to my own ears. I tried to smile, a reflex of customer service, but it failed to form. He stood up from the table in one fluid motion. The other men fell silent, watching him as he fixed me with a look that pinned me to the spot. He was taller than I'd realized, with broad shoulders filling out that suit with understated menace. I'm afraid something urgent has come up, I managed. My eyes darted to Marco by the bar, who was finally noticing the disturbance, his expression turning alarmed. I need to leave. I'm sure Marco can spare you for a moment. The gray-eyed man interrupted quietly. It wasn't phrased as a question. At a subtle gesture from him, Scarcheek stepped aside just enough for the man to approach me. Who are you? I breathed, my instincts screaming that I might be in even more peril than I'd thought. Up close, his presence was overwhelming. He radiated confidence and danger in equal measure. He gave a tight, polite smile that did not reach those penetrating eyes. Someone who heard you speaking Italian quite fluently just now. He paused, and something unreadable passed through his gaze. And someone who can tell when a person is in trouble. My heart thudded. He had heard. Maybe not every word, but enough. A part of me wanted to seize that and beg for help. He clearly had resources, power. Perhaps he could help me find my mother. But another part, the wary survivor in me, balked at trusting a stranger, especially one who all signs indicated was entangled with organized crime. The gun under his associate's jacket was proof enough of that. It's nothing I can't handle, I lied, straightening my back. Thank you for your concern, but I really must go. Family emergency. At that, something flickered in his gaze, understanding, perhaps. He inclined his head. Of course. Family is everything. I wasn't sure if I imagined the slight emphasis he put on that statement. He stepped aside, gesturing with an open palm toward the exit. After you, Miss Lombardi, I supplied hesitantly, surprised by the sudden courtesy. Sophia Lombardi. Miss Lombardi. He pronounced my name with a perfect Italian lilt. Naturally. His eyes stayed on me as I moved past him. I hope your mother is all right. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't mentioned it was my mother. Perhaps I had said madre into the phone, or maybe he just deduced it. Either way, the weight of his words lingered ominously as I made my way across the restaurant. Keenly aware of his gaze following me all the way, Marco sputtered with confusion, as I quickly explained that I had an emergency and needed to leave now. Whether it was the look of desperation on my face or the subtle wave of the gray-eyed man, which I saw out of the corner of my eye giving permission, Marco just nodded dumbly. Before anyone could change their mind, I rushed out into the cold night without even stopping for my coat. The shock of the frigid air was like a slap, but I barely felt it. I was running on pure adrenaline and fear. I jogged down the block, phone already in hand as I tried to figure out what to do. I needed to book a flight to Italy, tonight if possible. And then, the enormity of it was overwhelming. Flying to a country where I had few contacts beyond my mother's nurses, taking on men who outgunned and outnumbered me. It was absurd, but I had to do it, because no one else would. My mother had sacrificed everything for me. Now it was my turn to protect her. My apartment was only 6 blocks away. I nearly slipped on an icy patch as I started running, catching myself on a lamppost. Focus. I'd pack a bag, grab my passport, and then a sleek black car idling at the curb just ahead suddenly revved its engine and peeled away, turning the corner. The street was otherwise quiet at this late hour, a dusting of snow catching the orange glow of streetlights. I shivered, pausing to catch my breath and quell the panic rising in my throat. The sound of footsteps on pavement echoed behind me. I glanced back. A man in a dark overcoat was walking at a clipped pace a half block behind, heading the same direction as me. Every hair on my neck rose. Was he following me, or just a pedestrian in a hurry to get out of the cold? I started moving faster, my boots crunching on the thin layer of snow. The man sped up too. My heart began to pound. This wasn't paranoia. He was definitely tailing me. Another glance back. He was mid-30s, athletic build, and he had one hand tucked suspiciously inside his coat. A surge of alarm shot through me. Did he have a gun? I abruptly changed course, darting across the street. Maybe I could lose him through the alley ahead. "Miss Lombardi," a voice called out behind me. Not the smooth voice of the gray-eyed man, but unfamiliar and edged with authority. I ignored it and kept going. I wasn't about to find out what he wanted. "Sophia Lombardi, stop," the voice barked, definitely chasing me. I slipped into the narrow alley between a bakery and a closed deli, my pulse skyrocketing. The alley was piled, with trash bags and the distant neon of a sign barely lit the way. A dead end. My memory caught up a second too late. I skidded to a halt, breath puffing in front of me. Footsteps slowed at the mouth of the alley. The silhouette of the man loomed, blocking the only exit. My mind raced. Think. There was a rusty fire escape ladder just out of reach above me. No time to drag a trash bin over to climb. I spun around looking for another way. "Please," I called out, voice echoing harshly off brick walls. "I don't have any money. Just take my phone." He stepped under the flickering alley light, revealing a clean-shaven face and icy blue eyes. "I'm not a mugger." He flashed something inside his coat, a holster with a gun, but also a badge of some kind. It didn't look like NYPD. It was different, embossed with an Italian flag and an eagle. "I'm here on behalf of Dante Ricci." Dante Ricci, the name meant nothing to me, but I knew instantly who he must be. The gray-eyed man from Table 7. Of course he had a name, and now I did too. Dante. It suited him in a way, elegant yet infernal. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. My back pressed against the cold brick wall. There was no way past this guy. If he meant me harm, I was done for. But if he had a badge, was he some sort of Italian police? Or more likely private security for Dante? "Mr. Ricci requests your presence," the man said carefully. He didn't draw his gun, but his hand rested near it. I shook my head immediately. "I don't have time for this. My mother is in danger," he finished for me. His eyes softened just a fraction. "Which is exactly why you need to come with me." A chill, unrelated to the winter air, rippled down my spine. Dante must have heard more of my conversation than I'd realized. Or perhaps this man had. Maybe he spoke Italian too. In any case, they knew. "Mr. Ricci can help you," the man continued. "But not if you run off into the night alone. You'll be dead or disappeared by morning if you try. These people who took your mother, who are they?" I interrupted desperately. What do you know? He clamped his mouth shut, clearly unwilling to divulge more himself. Come, we really must go. He reached a hand toward me, not quite touching, but the implication was clear. I hesitated, my heart a drumbeat in my ears. If Dante Ricci truly wanted to hurt me, he could have done so back at the restaurant with far less trouble. Sending someone after me meant he did intend to involve himself in this. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? If he knew who took my mom, I'd be a fool not to at least hear him out. Yet every instinct warned me that stepping into Dante Ricci's world could be just as dangerous as facing this threat alone. But I had no choice. For my mother's sake, I couldn't turn down any chance of help. I took a shaky breath and nodded. Okay. Relief flitted across the man's face. He beckoned me forward and escorted me out of the alley. Parked at the curb was the same sleek black car I'd seen earlier. The back door opened as we approached, and I glimpsed Dante's unmistakable silhouette inside, illuminated by the soft glow of a reading light. My stomach did a flip. This felt like stepping into a den of lions. But for my mother, I would walk through fire. Gathering my courage, I slid into the warm leather interior of the car, into Dante Ricci's world, and hoped I wasn't making a deal with the devil. The door shut with a solid thunk, muffling the outside world. I found myself in the back seat of what felt like a limousine, face to face with Dante Ricci. The interior was dimly lit, the smell of fine leather and a hint of cologne surrounding us. Dante sat with one leg crossed over the other, utterly at ease. His gray eyes lifted from a tablet device in his hand to regard me. I felt pinned by that gaze, sharp, intelligent, and far too observant. I suddenly realized I was shivering, whether from cold or nerves or both. Without a word, Dante slipped off his tailored suit jacket and draped it around my shoulders. The unexpected gesture left me momentarily speechless. The jacket was warm, carrying his body heat, and a subtle scent of amber and wood smoke. Thank you, I managed softly, pulling it around myself. My own coat was still back at the restaurant, but somehow I doubted I'd be returning for it anytime soon. He inclined his head in acknowledgement. You ran out in a hurry, he said. It wasn't quite a question, more a gentle prompt. Up close in the intimate space of the car, his voice was as velvety as it had been in the restaurant, but now with an undertone of concern. I clenched my hands in my lap, acutely aware of the two other men seated in the front, one driving, the other in the passenger seat. They spoke quietly in Italian, discussing route and timing, pointedly not looking back at us, giving an illusion of privacy. Still, I lowered my voice. He didn't have a choice. My throat tightened again with fear. She's been taken, kidnapped, by people who left some kind of message about a boss. Dante exchanged a look with the driver in the rear view. Mirror, just a flicker of eyes. You mentioned the South. They said they were taking her south? I nodded. Marta, her nurse, thought they meant southern Italy. She said they were armed men. They threatened to kill her if she went to the police. Dante, please. I almost choked on his name, unfamiliar on my tongue. If you know who did this, tell me. I have to call the authorities or something. His expression hardened, slightly at my mention of authorities. If it's who I suspect, the police will be of little help, he said. There was no arrogance in his tone, just flat certainty. I believed him. The weight behind his words was chilling. Who do you suspect? The car pulled smoothly away from the curb. Dante watched me for another long moment, as if weighing how much to say. There's a man, he said slowly, who has been making trouble for my business. His name is Alessi Ferrero. I racked my brain, trying to recall if I'd heard that name. It sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. Is he Mafia? Like you? I blurted before I could bite my tongue. A ghost of a smile touched Dante's lips. You speak plainly. Refreshing. He didn't confirm or deny the Mafia part, which in itself was confirmation. Ferrero leads a crew that has been expanding, aggressively from Calabria up, through Campania and Lazio. Recently, he set his sights on Rome, and beyond. My mother is in Rome, I whispered, more to myself. And if he was targeting people in Rome? Indeed, Dante's jaw tightened. and for a moment a cold fury flickered across his face. He and I have some unfinished business. If Ferrero's men took your mother, it might not be entirely coincidental. I stared at him. You think they took her because of you? That sounded absurd. My mother and I were nobodies in the grand scheme. How would a criminal in Italy even know? I had crossed paths with Dante in New York tonight? Dante tented his fingers, elbows resting on his knee, and regarded me thoughtfully. I'm still trying to puzzle that out myself. Perhaps it was random, perhaps not. But either way, Ferrero will use anyone he can as leverage or punishment. Targeting family members, it's a tactic he favors. A muscle in his cheek ticked. I sensed this was personal for him. Punishment for what? I asked quietly. His eyes found mine in the dim. For any perceived slight, for being associated with me maybe, if he thinks you are, or for disobedience to him by others. It could even be mistaken identity. I won't know until I find out more. His voice softened. What matters now is getting your mother back safely, and dealing with Ferrero. The casual way he said it sent a small shiver through me that had nothing to do with the cold. I realized I was about to align myself with a mafia boss to save my mother from another mafia boss. How had my life twisted into this nightmare in the span of a few hours? I looked down at the fine leather seat, Dante's jacket still around me. Why are you helping me? I whispered. He was silent. I dared a glance at him. His face was shadowed, unreadable. Because, Miss Lombardi, he said at last, it seems we have a common enemy, and I do not tolerate the kidnapping of innocent women. There are lines even men like me should never cross. His voice held a conviction that made me believe him. Strange as that was, a criminal with morals, an oxymoron surely, but Dante Ricci clearly had a code of honor he lived by. Also, he added, almost as an afterthought, I could use someone with your linguistic talents. Your Italian is flawless, and I suspect you know other languages as well. I tensed, so he had noticed my accent. But there was no point denying it now. Yes, I'm a translator, or I was. I speak a few languages. Ottimo. Excellent. That could prove useful. Ferrero's network is diverse. He employs men from various ethnic groups. If we run into any complications, having someone who can understand multiple tongues is an asset. I swallowed. He was already talking as if I were part of his team. What exactly are you proposing? Come with me to Italy, Dante said, as simply as if inviting me for coffee. I intend to confront Ferrero and retrieve your mother. But it won't be a simple task. I could use your insight into your mother's situation and any linguistic help along the way. In return, he spread his hand slightly, I will ensure your mother's safe return, and your safety as well. Go with him to Italy. The idea was both terrifying and tantalizing. On my own, I had no real chance. With him, a man who clearly had resources, manpower, and a personal vendetta, it might just be possible to save her. But it also meant throwing my lot in completely with a mafia boss I met only an hour ago. How do I know I can trust you? I asked, hating how vulnerable I sounded. You say you'll help, but you could have other motives. You could be using me as bait, for all I know. Dante inclined his head in acknowledgement, as if the question were only natural. You have my word for what that's worth. I know trust is earned, not given freely, especially under these circumstances. But consider, if I meant you harm, would I not have done it already? I bit my lip. It was true. If all he wanted was to silence me or something, he easily could have. Instead, here I was wrapped in his jacket, being courteously asked rather than forced. And Miss Lombardi, you may find this hard to believe, he continued. But I have a mother too. Family. It's the one sacred thing we have. Whoever took your mother insulted not just you, but me. I don't let such insults stand. There was an edge of steel beneath his calm voice that told me Ferrero had made a grave mistake in Dante's eyes. I wondered what history lay between these two. Powerful men, but that was likely a story for another time. I inhaled slowly. All right, I'll go with you. My voice was barely above a whisper, but it was filled with resolve. On one condition, once we find my mother, I'm out. I want nothing more to do with the underworld, or whatever this is. Dante's lips curved in a faint smile. That is more than fair. Help me see this done, and I'll ensure you both return home safely. After that, what you do is your choice. I gave a small nod. It was probably the best offer I could hope for. One more thing. His gaze pinned me again. You will have to stay close. Ferrero may now consider you a target as well, and I will not risk him snatching you too. So from this moment on, you go where I go, understood? The idea of being under constant guard, under his constant eye, was both reassuring and nerve-wracking. But if Ferrero's men were really after me, I didn't want to face them alone. Understood, I agreed. Dante leaned forward and spoke to the driver in rapid Italian. All'aeroporto. Preparati a decollare. To the airport. Get ready for takeoff. My eyebrows shot up. You have a plane ready? He glanced back at me. I have a jet. We can be in the air within the hour. Time is of the essence, is it not? I couldn't argue with that. Relief flooded me so suddenly I almost teared up. He was actually doing it. Within hours of my mother's kidnapping, I was going to Italy with a man who, moments ago, had been a complete stranger sipping Prosecco at table 7. The surrealness of it all made my head spin. You look pale, Dante observed. Take a breath, Miss Lombardi. What's your mother's name? The question caught me off guard. Angela, I said softly. Angela Lombardi. Angela, he repeated as if committing it to memory. We'll get Angela back. The quiet determination. In his voice was a balm to my frayed nerves. I wrapped his jacket tighter around myself and closed my eyes for a moment, sending up a silent prayer that he was right, and that this wasn't all some elaborate trick. Because if Dante Ricci was deceiving me, I sensed he was the kind of man who could make me regret it forever. True to Dante's word, less than an hour later, I was buckled into a leather seat aboard a private Gulfstream jet, lifting off into the dark winter sky. I sat by the window, watching the lights of New York recede below, feeling like I was leaving one life behind and plunging into another. Maybe I was. Dante sat across from me in the spacious cabin, already on the phone speaking low in Italian. From the cadence and the occasional name, I caught Ferrero and Angela among them. I guessed he was mobilizing contacts in Italy to sniff out information. His efficiency was impressive. In the short drive to Teterboro Airport, he'd managed to get both of us cleared for an international flight on what I assumed was very short notice. The jet was staffed with a co-pilot and a single attendant who had greeted. Dante with deferential familiarity and me with polite warmth, as if it wasn't completely bizarre for a bedraggled waitress in a borrowed jacket to be tagging along with their boss at 2 a.m. I sipped at a cup of chamomile tea the attendant had pressed into my hands and tried to steady the whirl of anxiety, exhaustion, and adrenaline within me. Dante finished his call and moved to sit in the seat beside me, leaving a respectful distance, but close enough that I could see the flecks of steely blue in his gray irises. My people are looking into possible locations. Where Ferrero might take your mother, he said. Likely somewhere remote. He has a stronghold in Calabria, but also smaller properties in Sicily and outside Naples. We'll narrow it down. I nodded, appreciating that he was keeping me in the loop. Thank you. Those 2 words felt inadequate for the situation. I still can't quite believe any of this is real. An hour ago I was serving pasta. Now I'm on a private jet to Italy with... I trailed off, realizing perhaps I shouldn't call him a mafia boss to his face. He arched a dark eyebrow. With a dangerous criminal? Is that what you were going to say? I swallowed. With you, I amended, a bit embarrassed. To my surprise, he chuckled softly. I suppose I deserve that reputation. I won't pretend to be a saint. Sophia. It was the first time he said my first name, and it rolled off his tongue in that accent like a caress. But for what it's worth, I'm not in the habit of harming innocent people. Quite the opposite, in fact, when I can help it. I studied him for a moment. In the soft overhead lighting, the harsh planes of his face were gentler, and I could almost see the man he might have been if life had dealt him a different hand. Why do I get the feeling there's a story behind that? I asked quietly. He looked at me, surprised again, and perhaps a little impressed by my boldness. He leaned back, gaze drifting past me to the inky darkness outside. I grew up in this life, as you likely suspect. My father was, let's call him an influential man back in Sicily. When I was a boy, I saw things that I wish I hadn't. Innocents caught in the crossfire of old vendettas. It made an impression. His voice had gone soft, distant. I can't change what I am, Miss Lombardi, what I do, but I can choose what lines I refuse to cross. Ferrero, on the other hand, has no such limits. That's why he must be dealt with. I found myself hanging on his words, the glimpse into his past rendering him more human than I'd expected. The fact that he even cared about collateral damage was surprising for someone in his position. I'm sorry, I said softly, and when he looked at me in question, I added, for the boy you were, having to see those things. Something like pain flickered in his expression. Quickly masked, he inclined his head in thanks. We lapsed into silence. My eyelids were growing heavy as the stress and lack of sleep caught up. As if sensing this, Dante stood. Get some rest while you can. It will be a long day tomorrow. He moved to a seat further forward, giving me space. Part of me was relieved. I wasn't sure how to act around him yet. But another part felt a tiny pang that he left. Ridiculous. Curled up under a soft cashmere throw the attendant provided, Dante's jacket still draped over me like a protective shield, and closed my eyes. The last thought I had before sleep claimed me was that, against all odds, I felt safer with Dante Ricci nearby than I ever would alone. Dawn broke gray and cold. By first light, Dante had assembled a team of his most trusted men, about half a dozen, all grim-faced and armed to the teeth. They gathered in the courtyard of a private hangar in Rome as he outlined the plan. A two-vehicle approach to the remote farmhouse where Ferrero was supposedly holding my mother. A scout had confirmed seeing armed guards on the property overnight, and a helicopter matching the one used in the abduction had been spotted in a field nearby. It had to be the place. We had landed in Rome at sunrise, and Dante wasted no time. A car was waiting to take us, straight from the airfield to speak with Marta at the hospice. The meeting with her had been brief and emotional. She confirmed that the kidnappers spoke with strong Calabrian accents and cruelly, told my mother, your husband sends his regards as they took her. That chilling message, and Dante's reaction to it, revealed a hidden connection. Ferrero's family had been behind my father's death, and now, decades later, Ferrero was targeting us to settle old scores and lure Dante into a trap. The revelation left me shaken, but it also steeled my resolve. Ferrero was not just a random criminal. We shared a history of blood, even if I'd been unaware of it. Dante had known my father, or at least of him, and his own father had been killed by the same clan. We were bound by a common thread of loss at Ferrero's hands. Now, in Sicily, at Dante's family villa, his men prepared to strike back. Dante insisted I wear a bulletproof vest, which felt bulky under the spare jacket. Rosa, the kindly housekeeper who'd greeted us, lent me. He and Luca helped adjust the straps, and I caught Dante checking the fit with a mix of worry and determination etched on his face. Stay near me, no matter what, he said firmly as we prepared to depart the villa at first light. If shooting starts, get down and stay down. Let us handle it. I agreed, though my heart pounded at the thought of gunfire. This was really happening. I was about to step onto a battlefield to save my mother. I wasn't sure if I was brave or foolish, but I knew I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I hid, away while her life hung in the balance. The drive through the Sicilian countryside was tense and silent. Dante and I rode in the lead SUV. I could see his focus sharpening with every mile, his features settling into a hard mask that was equal parts wrath and control. He was heading into war, to settle it once and for all. I clenched my fists to stop their trembling. In the back of the vehicle with us, Luca offered me a curt nod of reassurance. I tried to return it, though I was grateful I hadn't eaten much. My stomach was doing flips. At last, we crested a hill, and Dante signaled for the convoy to stop. Below, in a shallow valley, lay an old stone farmhouse and a barn, bordered by leafless olive trees. A dilapidated truck was parked out front, and 2 men with rifles slung over their shoulders paced near the entrance. Not exactly high security, but enough to trouble my nerves. Dante turned to me, his voice barely above a whisper. "We'll approach on foot from here. Luca will stay with you at the rear until it's clear." "Understood?" I swallowed and nodded. "Be careful," I whispered. It was all I could manage. He gave me one long look, something unspoken in his eyes. Perhaps an apology for what violence I might witness, or a promise of his return. Then he slipped out of the car. The others fanned out, moving low and swift through the brush. I stayed crouched behind an old stone wall, watching anxiously as Dante and his men advanced toward the farmhouse. My heart thundered in my ears, nearly drowning the distant bleating of goats on the hillside. What happened next was quick and chaotic. One of the guards must have spotted a glint of sunlight on a weapon. Because he shouted an alarm, Dante's men broke cover, and a flurry of suppressed gunshots snapped the morning stillness. One guard went down. The other ducked behind a stone well, returning fire. Luca pressed me flat to the ground as bullets zinged through the air. I bit back a cry, adrenaline surging like ice in my veins. Over the low wall, I saw Dante move with lethal grace, flanking the remaining guard. A burst from his handgun and the man crumpled. Silence fell. My ears rang. It had been only seconds, but it felt like an eternity. "Go," Dante signaled us. Luca hauled me up and we ran to join Dante by the farmhouse door. My legs felt like jelly, but I forced myself forward. My mother was inside. Nothing else mattered. 2 of Dante's men kicked in the heavy wooden door. They swept in, weapons ready. I heard shouting in Italian from within. Dante followed close, and then Luca and I slipped in after. The interior was dim, dust motes dancing in the beams of early light through shutter slats. The front room was empty of people, just overturned. Chairs and a lingering smell of smoke. "Clear!" one of Dante's men called, stepping out of a side room. "Upstairs," Dante said, nodding toward a stairway. Suddenly, a sharp cry rang out, from somewhere behind the house. My blood went cold. It was my mother. "Mama!" I screamed, lunging toward the sound before Luca caught my arm. We hurried out through a back door into the courtyard between the house and barn. There, near the barn, was my mother in her hospital gown, slumped in her wheelchair, looking terrified but alive. A burly man with a black wolf tattoo on his neck held her from behind, a handgun pressed to her temple. And a few paces beyond them, by the barn door, stood Alessi Ferrero himself. He was a lean man in his 40s, dressed in a fine suit absurdly out of place in the farmyard. His dark eyes were alight with triumphant malice. In one hand he held a pistol, and in the other, a cell phone, likely expecting news of my arrival. He got more than he bargained for when Dante and his men appeared. "Ricci!" Ferrero spat, his lips curling in a sneer. "You got here fast. I was hoping to have to drag you out of hiding. But you delivered yourself to me." Dante positioned himself slightly in front of me, gun trained steadily on Ferrero. His voice was deathly calm. "It's over, Ferrero. Let the woman go." Ferrero laughed, a high, harsh sound. "You think I'm going to simply hand her over? After all the trouble I went through to get her? No, I think I'll finish what Papa started. 2 birds with 1 stone. The last Lombardi, and Salvatore Ricci's proud son." My breath caught. The last Lombardi. He meant me, after my mother. And Salvatore must have been Dante's father. This was as much a trap for Dante as it was a vendetta against my family. Dante's jaw tightened. "Your father paid for his sins, Alessi, and you're about to join him if you don't back down." Brave words. Ferrero sneered. "But my man here can put a bullet in the old woman's brain before you pull that trigger. Shall we test whose reflex is faster?" "No!" I cried out, stepping forward before Dante could stop me. Please don't hurt her." I raised my hands, trying to keep them from shaking. "Ferrero, I'm the one you hate, right? The daughter of Giovanni Lombardi. I'm right here. You have me. You don't need her." My voice broke. "She's sick. She's done nothing to you." Ferrero regarded me with a cold smile. "Ah, la bella figlia. You do look like him, you know. Same eyes." He took a step closer, gun now aimed vaguely in my direction. Your father was a stubborn fool. If he had just obeyed, so many tragedies could have been avoided, but at least I get to sweep up the remnants of that mess now. I felt Dante tense, as if he might lunge at Ferrero and rip him apart with his bare hands, but he held still, the barrel of his pistol trained on Ferrero's heart. "Alessi," Dante said in a low, deadly timbre. "This is between you and me. Let them go and we settle it." Ferrero grinned. Tempting, but no. "I think I'll watch you suffer first." He nodded to the tattooed man. "Do it." Time slowed to a crawl. The henchman snarled and shifted his aim from my mother's head toward me. I saw the muzzle flash. A shot rang out. I braced for pain, but Dante moved faster. He shoved me aside, a forceful, desperate motion. A sharp gasp left his lips as the bullet meant for me struck him instead. "Dante!" I screamed as he staggered. Chaos erupted. In the split second, Ferrero's attention flickered toward Dante. A thunderous crack split the air. Luca had fired. Hitting the henchman square in the chest, the man toppled, releasing his grip on my mother's wheelchair. Ferrero roared in fury and swung his pistol toward the fallen Dante, finger tightening on the trigger. A surge of pure wrath and terror flooded me. Without thinking, I dove in front of Dante, arms spread to shield him. Ferrero's gun barked, but I never felt the bullet. Another shot sounded almost simultaneously, and Ferrero's face went slack with surprise. His weapon slipped from his fingers as he crumpled to his knees, a red stain blooming on his pristine shirt. One of Dante's men had flanked him and fired the shot that ended it. Alessi Ferrero pitched face forward into the dust, dead. All I could hear in the aftermath was my own ragged breathing and the ringing in my ears. The scent of gunpowder burned my nose. It was over. It was over. "Mama!" I snapped out of my daze and scrambled to my mother. She was weeping, eyes huge with relief as Luca untied the cords binding her to the wheelchair. I threw my arms around her frail form, careful of the IV port still taped to her hand. She felt so light and fragile, but she was solid and alive in my embrace. "Oh, thank God, I sobbed. She clutched me weakly, whispering my name over and over, tears wetting my shoulder. "Sophia. Figlia mia," she rasped. I was so afraid. "I'm here, Mama, I'm here." I pulled back and cradled her face, brushing her graying hair back. Her pulse fluttered under my fingers, but she managed a smile through her tears. Then I remembered. Dante. I whirled around to find him collapsed on one knee, a hand pressed to his side. Blood seeped between his fingers. "Dante!" I rushed to him as Luca and the others secured the area. The men confirmed Ferrero was dead and no more threats lurked. But all my focus was on Dante's ashen face. "It's nothing," he insisted through gritted teeth, though his voice lacked its usual strength. "Just a scratch." "Let me see," I demanded, fear sharpening my tone. He relented, and I peeled back the fabric of his jacket and shirt from his left side. The vest he wore had caught part of the bullet's force, but a red gouge marked where the bullet had punched through the edge into flesh. "We need a medic." I called to no one in particular, my voice high with panic. "Already on the way," one of Dante's men said, speaking into a radio. Dante caught my hand, drawing my gaze back to his. "Sophia, are you hurt?" The fact that he asked while he was the one bleeding made my heart squeeze painfully. "I'm fine," I managed, tears blurring my vision. You saved me." He gave a faint, crooked smile. "Of course." As if there had never been any question. My composure broke. I flung my arms around him, heedless of his injury, and buried my face against his neck. He went still in surprise for a beat. Then I felt his good arm wrap around me tightly. "Grazie," I whispered brokenly against his skin. "Thank you, Dante." "Shh." He stroked my hair once gently. "It's over now. You're both safe." I pulled back enough to look at him. We were both a mess, dusty, tear-streaked, blood-stained, but in that moment I'd never seen a man so worthy in my life. He had risked everything for us. My heart brimmed with gratitude and something deeper, something that scared and thrilled me. He winced then, pain flaring in his side. and I remembered he still very much needed medical attention. I helped ease him to sit against the wall of the barn. One of his men rushed over with a first aid kit and began efficiently dressing the wound. My mother, despite her weakness, insisted on reaching out to touch Dante's arm. "Thank you, signore," she said hoarsely. "You saved us." Dante shook his head humbly. "I'm sorry you were put in danger, Signora Lombardi. Rest now, you'll be home soon." She gave him a gentle, motherly smile, eyes flicking to me with a look I couldn't quite interpret. Was that approval? Before exhaustion overcame her, and she slumped back in her chair. The next hour was a blur. Paramedics arrived and tended to my mother and Dante. We were whisked away by Dante's helicopter to a private hospital in Palermo where my mother was admitted for recovery and Dante's wound properly treated. Fortunately, the bullet had passed cleanly through Dante's side without hitting any major organs. He bore the pain stoically, more concerned about my mother's condition. Her vitals were stabilizing after fluids and care. Doctors said with rest and medication, she would be okay. Relief unlike any I'd ever known flooded me. My mother was safe. The nightmare was ending. But as that weight lifted, another pang settled in my chest. The realization that soon I would have to say goodbye to Dante and return to my normal life. 2 days later, a cool winter sun shone over the Rome airport tarmac where I stood with my mother beside a waiting jet. Dante had insisted on flying us home to New York in his private plane to ensure our comfort and safety. My mother, bundled in a coat and looking frail but much better, was already aboard, having given us some privacy with a knowing smile. Our luggage and provisions were packed. There was nothing left but the farewell. Dante stood before me, a bandage visible under his open-collared shirt. His face was back to its composed mask, but I knew him well enough now to notice the tightness in his jaw, the reluctance in his posture. We hadn't had a moment, truly alone since the rescue. There had been doctors and nurses, then coordinating the quiet handling of Ferrero's demise with his associates. Now at last, we had a brief quiet. I searched for words, but they felt inadequate. "I don't know how to thank you," I began softly, looking up into those storm cloud eyes that had become so dear to me, "for everything. You saved my mother's life. You saved my life. You owe me nothing," Dante said firmly. "It is I who should thank you for trusting me, for helping me put an end to a very dark chapter." We stood a foot apart, a gulf of unspoken feelings between us. I realized my hands were trembling. I clasped them together to still them. So, what now? It was a foolish question. Now I would fly home and Dante would continue his life here, balancing on the knife's edge of power and peril. Our worlds would separate as abruptly as they'd collided. The thought brought a dull ache to my chest. He cleared his throat. "Now you take your mother home and live your life, free of all this." His voice was gentle, but each word felt heavy. "I've already arranged for discreet security to watch over you both in New York for a while, just in case any of Ferrero's remnants stir up trouble. But I don't expect they will. And you?" I asked. "You'll be okay?" A wry smile touched his lips. "It will take more than a scratch to do me in. I'll be fine." We lapsed into silence. This was it, the parting of ways. Yet I couldn't move. Something inside me screamed that walking away now was wrong, that I was leaving behind. What exactly? A dangerous man who had become my protector? My friend? Something more? Dante broke the silence first. "Sophia." My name sounded like a caress in his mouth. "I meant what I said the other night. After this, you're free of any obligation to me. I want you to be safe and happy. Away from my world." He hesitated, the slightest tremor in his composed facade. "But know that if you ever need me, if you ever even want to see me, I'll come. Wherever you are." Tears pricked my eyes. This reserved, controlled man was laying his feelings bare as best he could. He was telling me the choice was mine. I swallowed against the tightness in my throat. "What if—" My voice faltered, but I forced myself on. "What if I want to see you again?" His eyes darkened, hope and caution warring within them. "Then I'll be here in a heartbeat. You need only say the word." A tear escaped down my cheek. This isn't exactly a fairy tale ending, is it? I said with a shaky laugh. No white horses or promises of happily ever. After, Dante's hand reached up to gently wipe the tear from my skin. No, he agreed softly. Our worlds aren't a fairy tale. But that doesn't mean this is the end of our story. That was all I needed to hear. I closed the distance between us and rose on my tiptoes, winding my arms around his neck. His arms came around my waist instantly, as if he'd been waiting for permission. I pressed my lips to his in a kiss that poured every unspoken emotion into it. Gratitude, passion, longing, and above all, promise. He returned my kiss fervently, one hand cradling the back of my head, the other drawing me tight against him. Time fell away. All the doubts, the fears about the future dissolved in the heat of that embrace. There was only this moment, and the quiet understanding passing between us that we meant far, more to each other than circumstance, had allowed us to say. When we finally parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. Ti voglio bene, Sofia, he murmured, voice rough with emotion. I care for you deeply. It wasn't quite an I love you, but it resonated with a profound sincerity. Anch'io, Dante, I whispered back. Me too. For a long second, we simply held each other on the windy tarmac, committing every detail to memory, his lashes against his cheek as he closed his eyes, the way his shoulders rose and fell with steady breaths, the warmth of his embrace shielding me from the chill. At last Dante pulled back, cupping my face in his hands. Go, he said softly. Your mother is waiting. And I will wait too. I nodded, sliding my hands down to his and squeezing them once before stepping away. My heart felt both heavy and buoyant at once, a bittersweet mix. I ascended the steps to the jet and turned at the cabin door for a final glance. Dante stood where I'd left him, a solitary figure against the gray morning sky. He lifted a hand in a subtle wave, a rare smile ghosting across his lips. Not a goodbye, but a see you later. I pressed my fingers to my lips and extended them toward him, a promise carried on the distance. Then I stepped inside. As the jet took off, I watched from the window as Dante's figure grew smaller below, until he was just a memory against the patchwork of Rome. My mother gently took my hand, offering comfort and understanding. Leaning back, I closed my eyes. So much had changed in the span of a few days. I had ventured into a deadly underworld, faced fear and loss, and discovered an unexpected connection with a man who lived in shadows. It wasn't a neat ending tied with a bow, but it was real and hard-earned. Whatever the future held, whether Dante and I would find our way back to each other or remain as two souls that crossed paths intensely, I knew neither of us would ever be the same. We had saved each other in different ways, forging a bond tempered by danger and sacrifice. And it all began with a phone call in Italian answered at exactly the wrong time. Or perhaps, in fate's grand design,